Hi there. You're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Back for another week.
It's going to be back for another week. It's Sunday and we're mad.
Everything just keeps getting better.
Oh, yeah, everything's great. You see, there's brain-eating amoeba in Texas water,
fuck
apparently.
Off. Shut up. No, stop it.
I saw that headline, was like, wow, all right, 2020 really doesn't know when to stop. Like, you think, all right, democracy as we know it is crumbling around us. The Republicans are finally showing their evil lizard people faces like far more openly. Coronavirus is destroying us all. The fires that are happening both now and back in January. How could things get any worse? Well, apparently water in Texas might make your brain eat itself.
Which actually does explain Texas.
Texas is a lovely place, George. I wouldn't hear you besmirch.
I hear Texas is lovely. Like, everyone I know who's been to Texas says it's a lovely place. But yeah, it's also got some huge problems. But I don't have much details on the amoeba thing. That just came back to my mind being like, that's another fuck thing that's going on. And it's kind of amusing just to have something random and amoeba related at the top of the show.
We do like to start our shows with amoeba content at all times where possible.
And that's the end of the show. Yeah. Wrap it up.
Yeah.
Okay,
Adam, we talked about this in our last design meeting. It's the the new amoeba-centric segment of the show. We have an amoeba story every week.
Where it's now just a PC parts picking podcast and in between bouts of discussing amoebas. That's the new show. And if you don't like it, you can get your money back.
Okay, so the power delivery capacitors on the RTX 3080, go.
So, why would they cheap out and use 6 of them when the design only said to use 5 and 1? No, so...
I will admit, when you guys talk about that, my eyes glaze over.
You know, you just don't want to use the cheap capacitors for all 6 of them when... Anyway, the point is, we're a news and politics podcast.
Let's actually get into that discussion when we brought it up as a gag.
That's fine. That's fine. It was in the design specs, but that's fine. So it's a news and politics podcast where we talk about the things that make everyone's lives terrible ad nauseum. I do long for a time where I constantly didn't have to argue with all of the dumb, terrible people that are adjacent to my life that I can't get rid of about mundane daily things that are outside of our control. Like, when do we get
argue, George? You just let it be, man. Let it be.
Yeah, except when you are having a discussion in good faith with someone who keeps turning it back to politics because they want to bait you and have an argument. And I just like, I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people where I'm like, I know that this person has differing political views to me, and that is not an area in which we can have a productive discussion, and I will avoid it. But then when you keep throwing stuff in like, oh, we're turning into a communist country when the LNP is coming up on 9 years of contiguous rule. It grinds my gears, Adam. It does grind my gears ever so slightly.
Just gotta, have a Mai Tai and change the conversation to record bank fines.
Okay.
It's much more politically neutral. Everyone can hate the banks. Everyone can get on board with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, except for the LNP who makes the rules, but yes, go on.
Well, look, big news this week, boys. Westpac have been handed down the largest corporate fine in Australia's history, $1.3 billion.
Record-breaking.
Record-breaking. New record.
Here at Westpac, we have the highest recorded fines of any other major bank. That's how you know you can trust that we definitely don't do anything about money laundering.
And that's what it's for.
Look at our 2.97% comparative rate today.
But look, if they give me a great deal on my home loan, like, who cares?
I'll take it.
Oh, yeah. Launder the shit out of whatever you want if you give me a great home loan.
Yeah, it's like HSBC. Just build windows for the drug cartels to literally back truckloads of cash up to the bank. As long as I get a rate that's below 2.5%, I really don't care. Go for it. Yeah, you're laundering cartel money, whatever. Who amongst us that does it? Let he amongst us who hasn't laundered the occasional billion worth of cartel money cast the first stone. That's what I always say.
It's not just cartel money, George. It's also child exploitation payments.
The best kind! The best kind of payments! The ones with maximum cruelty attached!
Ah, you tricked me, Adam. I was on board with a home loan, no matter the consequences, and then you say, oh, but it involves, like, you know, exploiting children. I'm like, oh, you got me. You got me.
Triggered. So over a period of time, Austrac, I think Austrac, which are the Australian regulator basically for the finance sector, they launched a suit, I think in November, catching Westpac by a sort of surprise. They've also done their own internal review, and they've listened, they've learned, and they're going to implement various measures to try and combat this, all that kind of crap. But yeah, essentially, I think Westpac were also quite surprised at the size of this fine. I think the previous highest one was something like 700 million, I think, to CBA.
Yeah, Commonwealth Bank, I thought, got hit with a massive fine for similar.
So it was basically the Commonwealth Bank scheme was essentially people were depositing cash at deposits that weren't getting flagged. So I think it's above $10,000 and you're supposed to get flagged at the ATM. What did I say?
No, that's it. No.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're supposed to flag it when someone deposits more than $10,000 at a time at the ATM, and they were consistently not doing that. Fun fact about the Austrac website, I don't know if this is still the case, but when they redid their website and launched it about a year and a half ago, you might hear the voice of yours truly on the YouTube videos that explain how to use the website.
Hey.
That's a true fact. Yeah. I got contracted out to do the screen capture and the the voiceover thing for that. So it might be George, old George, who's telling you how to use the Austrac website properly.
So the exact crime that Westpac effectively admitted to doing now, they failed to properly report over 19.6 million international transfers amounting to over $11 billion.
That's a lot of transfers so when people start talking about.
So hang on. So the fine is 1.3 billion, and they made how much?
Well, they didn't make it. They
$11 billion moved around.
Yeah. So total. Do we even know? That's what we are aware of, right? That's what we found. So are we even aware that the fine even eclipses the amount of money that they made during the process of illegally moving this money around?
I don't know. It may have done. $1.3 billion is a lot of money.
Yeah, but if you made 10 billion, no, I know they didn't make it; they transferred. But say you make, for example, $1 billion doing something illegal, and then you are fined $100 million. That gives you a margin of
You've still walked away
90%. You're still very profitable off the back of that exchange. That is a cost that, as a banker, you might be willing to make.
Yeah, no? It's like people just parking their Ferraris in no parking zones because they're just like, well, sick, I still got to park, and I'll pay $80 in fines for this
because I'm a millionaire.
Just because I can. So if it's like, oh, what you mean? I'm just going to get fined $100 million to earn $900 million? Okay.
I did see somewhere in the comments that if you break it down to what it is per breach or whatever else, it's not much per breach. It's a couple of $100 in terms of a slap on the wrist. But what it did make me think was all those child pedophile ring sort of, I don't know if they're conspiracy theories or whether they're whatever they are, those theories that are out there. It's if there's that much money floating around, it makes me wonder whether there's some truth to it. Because
no one's denying. You're talking about the sort of QAnon child abuse conspiracy theory stuff that we've talked about in recent weeks.
Professional, rings of pedophiles.
There are, I don't think anyone disputes that child abuse is a real thing. There was a great episode on the Jordan Harbinger show a couple of months ago where he interviewed a guy who used to work for Homeland Security and whose job it was to track down these kinds of organizations and try and bring them to justice. And there is no doubt that there are criminal conspiracies where children are being abused. There is human trafficking. All of that stuff exists. Now, is the president
Donald
leading
Trump
a secret resistance from within inside the government to secretly combat it and bring it down? No, I don't think that's the case. I'm almost certain it's not the case.
Yeah, a little odd. The man who frequently associated with people like Jeffrey Epstein and all that sort of stuff. I don't think he's trying to bring them down.
Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein's mate was not on the inside trying to bring things down. And I think the whole, like, I don't think it, for you to recognize that is a conspiracy, it doesn't necessitate the like, just because child abuse exists, right? And we know it exists, and it's it's a real recognized problem, and a lot of criminal syndicates are making a bunch of money out of it, doesn't mean that every nonsensical QAnon conspiracy theory horseshit thing that comes up is therefore credible, right?
Well,
like
that's
the two things.
Jokingly, was more that
No, but like I think some people would genuinely be confused by that. They're like, oh, it's from these are the proceeds of, child abuse, essentially. Therefore, that feeds into this narrative of like, oh, okay, well, if that's true, then all of these other things are true. That's how the conspiratorial sort of mind would interpret that information.
Yeah.
Now, we were saying before that obviously it's the biggest fine in Australia's history. Obviously, this is, would have deeply affected the customers' perception and the shareholders' perception of Westpac, and they dropped 1%.
1%. Which is just like a daily fluctuation, really.
And then literally 3 or 4 days later, the federal government announced that it was loosening lending restrictions and it jumped back up again.
Everyone, woo, buddy! Could you imagine if any other business, if you went to like Baker's Delight and they're like, we've passed $10 billion worth of child pedophilia money. You'd be like, I don't need those fucking cinnamon rolls that bad. I will go elsewhere for my fucking, bacon cheese rolls. Like, I will not do business with you anymore. Like, but for some reason, this level of like egregious unethical behavior, people are like, well, what are you going to do? Move bank accounts? Don't be ridiculous. That's all I have to say up there. Oh, well, you're going to close them up. You're going to call them. It's a whole thing. I don't think so. I think I'll just allow intolerable cruelty to continue with my dollars backing it. Yeah, that seems like the response.
And it does, on top of that, like, it makes you wonder what was the point of a royal commission into dodgy lending schemes and God knows what else.
There wasn't a point because
wind it back.
The Liberal government didn't fucking want it in the first place and spent months, if not over a year, resisting the calls for it. Like, they didn't want a royal banking commission. So, like...
And they probably only did it just so that they can say they were doing it.
And they can say they did it. Yeah. And now it's done.
Like, it is difficult to get a home loan at the moment, as someone who works in property. But by the same token, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like, if it's hard for you to get a loan, that's probably a good thing because it means that you're not putting yourself in a position where you are potentially going to be financially screwed. If everything goes to shit.
So when I applied for the loan that I got on this place, there was a lot of scrutiny around, like, okay, well, what's your budget? Like, we're going to compare that against what your actual spendings are, against like, your Netflix subscription, like, there's a credit card in your name. Oh, that's a work card. Okay, well, we're going to have to talk to your work to make sure that's a work card. And like, yes, it seems a little bit onerous at the time, but I am comforted by the fact that there is that level of scrutiny going on with large financial transactions. The reason they want you to have 20% of 20% deposit before buying a home is a good thing, because it means if your home drops in value by 10, 20%, you're not going to be immediately underwater if you need to foreclose on your home. And, this is exactly what caused a lot of all of these restrictions were largely in response to the global financial crisis and the housing crisis in the United States in 2008. And I think for the most part, they're pretty reasonable restrictions on who should have free access to capital. Like, maybe, was it a little bit too onerous? Could we have done things in a way that was a bit more expedited? Yes. But that doesn't mean like we should just be unleashing a fire hose of capital on the markets. Yeah. Like, I understand we want to get the economy going and all this sort of stuff, but like, Australia's property market, especially Melbourne and Sydney, has already been like overheated for the better part of a generation at this point,
Yeah.
and allowing just like rivers of capital, with a fire hose that's not going to improve housing affordability for anyone. I don't know who benefits from
help.
this.
Yeah, it's
But
literally
other than
help
the banks.
builders and developers.
Yeah. Builders, developers, banks. That's who. But the thing is, the consumer. I feel like the consumer actually gets screwed in this situation, because if you have looser lending standards, so does everyone else, right? So presumably you've got the same access to the pool of capital that everyone else does in terms of being able to borrow and buy a home. But if these lending standards are loosened, what you're doing is you're introducing additional competition into the market. There's more people now, which is the point, right?
Drives prices back up again, which defeats the whole point of what we did in the first place.
Right. So you've got additional people that can now get money that probably shouldn't be able to get money necessarily, and those people are now competing against the people who would be in the market and who should be able to be in the market to buy a home, which drives the prices further upwards. And that's the point. That's what they talk about when they say getting the economy going is driving prices up. And that's not a problem we need solved right now.
It definitely would help with investment and that kind of thing, and construction. But, again, in Melbourne and Sydney, you've probably got to look at, is that a sustainable thing to occur? One rule doesn't necessarily fit every single mold in the country. But anyway, that's really, we're a news and comedy podcast, so let's go back to the comedy. Let's find some comedy, boys. Let's have a look through our list of stories here, and let's something else we can get angry at, which I know Tom's got very strong opinions on this. The National Broadband Network. There's going to be a little cheeky expansion to the old NBN.
Or just the Liberal government just announced a little cheeky upgrade to the NBN, because obviously people have been working from home for the past 6 or 7 months, quite en masse. It's put a lot of strain on the broadband network throughout the country because of teleconferences and downloads and uploads and all these sorts of things.
Who could have seen this coming? There would be a need for the internet in the 21st century. That's so weird.
Having a better infrastructure sounds like a great idea. So they're expanding the network. It's going to cost maybe another, $4.5 billion? $3.5 billion, roundabout that.
What's a casual $3.5 billion amongst mates?
Yeah.
They had this bright idea, the Liberal government. They said, what's good? The fibre part of the network is really good. So won't it be good if rather than having fibre to the node and then running copper, which is expensive and degrades over time and needs to be maintained, and actually ends up costing a lot more money, rather than having the copper go to the house, what we should do is take the fibre all the way to the premises, and the Labor Party exploded. They literally burst into flames.
Kevin Rudd just had whiplash at his computer as he was composing his next angry tweet.
Kevin Rudd,
that's all he does now.
Kevin Rudd, before he even saw the news, was just at his desk at his home and just looked up and goes, "It's happened." He felt a disturbance in the force.
Yeah, it's just, I remember seeing this headline, and my partner said she just heard me in the next room go, "Fuck off," really loudly, because Jesus Christ,
what a good idea! You bring the fibre right to the premises. That's such a good idea. That's so good.
The beginning, not only I know I'm a little sketchy on some of the details, but I know the cabinet papers or whatever that came out a few years ago. Remember when just that guy bought a secondhand cabinet from a shop in Canberra and it had all this secret shit in it? Some of those documents talked about the financing plans, I think, for the original NBN, and saying that actually, that they couldn't have just spent it to upgrade the network. There was some would have put us in a huge amount of debt, or et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I'm not the smartest on how that sort of budgeting works.
Remember when we cared about debt?
Yeah, I remember we cared about debt. But regardless, that was the plan. This was the plan. It just makes me so angry. This was the plan all along, and it was going to cost a certain amount of money and probably be done 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And then they said, nah, let's make the shit one quicker, but then they didn't do it quicker, and it's now cost like twice as much as they said it was going to be. It's going to cost another $3.5 billion more.
Yeah. As someone who studies project management, you should know that the NBN is basically like the example we use of a project that's gone terribly. It's that and the Sydney Opera House. Those are the two examples. The Sydney Opera House is like incredibly expensive, well over budget. But at least now people are like, it looks pretty good though, eh? Like,
yeah, it's got to stay. But the result,
the stage isn't big enough that when they had ballet dancers jumping off the side, they had someone to catch them because there wasn't enough off stage for them to jump into. But like aside from that, it looks pretty good. At least it's like considered a success now in retrospect. At no stage in the future will the NBN be considered a success. Like, it is locked in as a project management fucking laughing stock.
Just been a massive laughing stock, because not only was when the Liberal Party were in opposition talking about 25 megabits per second is more than enough for your average household or whatever. Not only going on from those bullshit arguments, but then the dude in charge, I don't think he's in charge anymore, actually. Was it Bill Morrow, I think his name was? Just dropping things like, we could upgrade the network. Like, the network could be providing things like gigabit speeds, which is 10 times faster than like the top tier NBN that they were talking about, the 100 megabit. Like, of doing gigabit speeds, but like Australians wouldn't even use it. Even if we gave it to them for free, they wouldn't even use it.
Yep.
I remember that being a laughing stock at the time, but now some providers can offer gigabit connections, and as soon as they started, fucking everyone bought them.
Turns out the internet, really fucking important.
Yeah, and it turns out, if you offer the speeds, there's people who want to use it.
If you build it, they will come.
And the pandemic's just gone to show, like, this past 6 months of everyone being way more at home and needing way more bandwidth, just goes to show that it wasn't just us nerds wanting to be able to download game patches and 4K pornography really quickly.
Like, it wasn't
just that though as well, just to be clear.
I still want the 4K porn.
Any government policy that comes with the added benefit of easily accessible 4K pornography get a thumbs up in my book.
I'm going to quote you on that, Tom.
I want you to quote me on that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting what you say about this proposed desalinization plan, but does it help me get 4K porn faster? And if so, I will vote for it.
But it's just ridiculous. Everything that they've said, like, be like, no, don't need that, has just been proven wrong.
Yeah.
Just along the way. It actually, like, something I guess I want to bring up in relation to this topic, because I was having a conversation with my partner Alice the other day, where, much like this situation, right, do you guys think that the pandemic has, like, it's kind of like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I guess just an outcome of the pandemic is going to be, like, so many policies that were maybe considered more center or more left, or like, the arguments of at least the non-Liberal Party side, they're gonna start backflipping on a lot of that as it goes forward, because the pandemic has given us, like, it's no longer a hypothetical.
So
right?
Explain a little bit. Sorry, could you rephrase that?
Like, think about when we talk about putting the genie back in the bottle when it comes to doubling New Start. They are doing it, like, they're going to be reducing the coronavirus supplements and things like that. But now that they've done it, like, now that they've had to pay it, it's going to be harder to walk it back. Is that then going to have to be a policy? Same with the NBN, right?
You'll find in the budget that they announce, I think next week or this week, whenever it's coming out, that they will be spending like crazy, because they have to. If they don't spend, we're fucked. The question, as the ABC reporter said this morning I was watching, is that what are they spending it on? There's going to be a lot of money splashed around, but where's it actually going, and is it actually going to be an effective use of funds to reach the desired outcome? We all know what the outcome is. We want to grow the economy and, get jobs and growth going, bananas. But are the policy measures they're going to implement going to actually achieve that in combination with the funding? But my answer to your question, Tom, is yes. We will see a return to, and we already are seeing this sort of Keynesian, model of economics having at least a small resurgence. The question being is, how long will that last for, and in what ways will it exist?
I think there are certainly, like, the Australian government has looked to what happened in Europe, over the last sort of 10, 20 years with the austerity programs and things like that they had in place after the GFC and things like that. A lot of really extremely negative outcomes for disadvantaged communities in particular. So I think the evidence is in that it's not debatable that during a crisis like this, the best thing you can do is direct fire hoses of cash to the economy. I don't think anyone really disputes that at this point. The reason that the global financial crisis wasn't worse than it was in America is because of the what was at the time enormous stimulus spending that they were able to get past, and which has been eclipsed many times over, both in America and in Australia, with what we've done with coronavirus. So it is, but I take your point that it will be harder once these, certainly if you've got people that are LNP voters, for example, that are currently living off these packages, job seeker, job keeper, and they are winding down and they do not have the ability to go outside and earn a living for themselves. I think there is only so much animus they can have towards state governments before it starts to splash back on federal governments as well. It's like, well, I voted for you. You need to keep me alive during this fucking situation. And if you don't, I will punish you at the next. So I think it's entirely possible that happens. I think Adam's right, though, to the effect that that's durable and long term. I don't know, because as soon as the pandemic's over, guess who's getting austerity measures again? Guaranteed. So yeah, it's a matter of how quickly and how drastically do we return to normal from those elevated rates. But I do think it does put us one step further along on the path to something like universal basic income or those sorts of...
That was sort of what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking we're just suddenly going to flip a whole bunch of people and they're all going to be radical lefties or whatever.
No.
But yeah, when people talk about things like universal income or and just the benefits of raising unemployment benefits and all that sort of stuff, all these people where all it was for them was just, you just lazy, dull-bludgery bastards and stuff like that, have now... There'd be people with that attitude who have now been put through this situation of of joblessness thanks to the pandemic and all that sort of stuff to see the benefits of it. That it's almost I was thinking has the pandemic affected society in such a way that people who weren't moved or engaged by the hypotheticals now coming around to a different way of thinking? It's the same as the Liberals were against this exact NBN concept for 7 years, and then now that we're in the situation, now that people could see this is what it would have been good for, is when they're finally, getting their act together.
It's a proof of concept, right?
Yeah.
So certainly, 10, 20 years down the track, if we have a situation where automation and AI has subsumed a significant number of jobs, which it is expected to do, and there is nothing to replace them, it is conceivable that someone who was on JobKeeper or JobSeeker this time around would turn around in 10, 20 years and go, well, this is a similar situation where I've been displaced out of a job out of no fault of my own. We did it then. Why can't we do it now? And so I think the political willpower
it shifts the Overton window slightly because people have lived experience.
Yeah.
The question being is, when it comes to voters, is how long are their memories? And how self-reflexive are those voters?
Yeah, and in the instance of Australian voters, it seems to be goldfish level short. So
we'll see. But, economically speaking, Morrison is actually a real centrist politician in terms of his federal... But he kind of has to be.
Even if he does speak in tongues occasionally.
Yeah.
So is the matter then, can we talk about voter memory and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Can we somehow condense this concept of you have had previous lived experience and so this should have totally changed your perception of these previously hypothetical scenarios? Can we get that into a good, catchy 3-word slogan?
Don't starve to death. The Labour Party will help you not starve to death. Don't want to starve to death?
A good slogan. Get Lara Worthington to say it on television. I don't know.
Just to ask you guys, though, because you've been very angry about this announcement. Are you happy that they are rolling out faster internet for 3.5 billion?
I'll as in the concept of if my internet quality improves, because even though I've got pretty decent NBN, if if it improves further, great. Like, I'll take better internet, but it's just the principle of it, right? It's the hypocrisy.
You'd rather do it than not do it. You know what I mean? Like, you're not
going to be like, let's just stay on copper forever, like talking through tin cans as Zoom calls.
Yeah, but that's not the point. This is what we proposed, and had we have gone with the original solution that Labor offered, we would be in this position years sooner at significantly less cost to the taxpayer. And I don't want to say I fucking told you so, but I fucking told you so. This is exactly what the fuck I said would happen. Like, and I'm not a telecommunications expert. I'm just a guy with a fucking brain who saw that upgrading a degraded copper network, which we knew at the time wasn't functioning at its best and would have to be replaced at a fairly extensive cost, someone who is on the ground looking at the reporting with no technical expertise could have told you this was a bad fucking idea. And then they've done exactly what governments do, which is they go the long, stupid, dumb way, which costs extra and is much slower. And it's just infuriating because we absolutely fucking told you so. You can pull the tapes. You can have a look at 2015, 2014 Unnatural Selection, whatever it was. I'm fucking, we got it on tape.
Yeah.
What I am hopeful of, though, is that announcements like this mean that the right-wing conservative faction of the Liberal Party, are at least at this point willing to, slide to the left a little bit to get some common sense.
As long as they let their donors buy up large tracts of land for no money, then they're happy to do all that
maybe
sort of
they'll
stuff.
slide a bit to the left on a fair few issues, Adam. But if you fucking mention climate change, you're out.
What's that called? What's that called when you give your mates money? It rhymes with barruption, confluption, something. I don't know. It's not coming to me. Surruption. I think that's it. Yeah. When you hand your mates money because you're in government. Yeah, no, I think that's surruption.
Yeah.
Now, the question is the Victorian government corrupt?
Wow.
Is there some sort of conspiracy?
If you listen to the media hatchet job that's been going on against Dan Andrews for the last 3 to 4 months, you would have to say yes. The polling, actually, as I found out this week, differs slightly. So apparently it's around 63% sort of approval for Dan Andrews and how he sort of handled the coronavirus. If you look at the headlines of Dan Andrews, it's always like sweaty pictures of Dan Andrews taken from unflattering angles being like, is Dan Andrews a cunt or a piece of shit? Like, opinion. Yeah. And like, meanwhile, contrast that with the headlines that you get about Scott Morrison, who's currently polling around 65%. So a 2-point differential in polls where a 1 to 2 point differential is the margin of error. And they're like, Morrison bounces back because he's a fucking hero. Like, it's like we're talking about 2% difference between these two leaders. And yet the media coverage from them could not be more vastly different. And that is clearly purely political. Like,
that being said, there's been a lot of, one, we've got some loosened restrictions today, which is great.
Sure.
Slightly loosened, we won't go into depth of that. You can go read ABC and listeners can work out what they are.
The communist ABC, Adam, full of
communist
ABC, full of fucking socialists trying to take over the country by staying out of government for a decade.
You can, if you go to a newscaster of your choice, and they will obviously have the details,
and they will serve you whichever facts you prefer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the hotel. The inquiry into hotel quarantine has been rolling on over the last week, and there is a scalp that has been claimed.
Love a
Jenny
scalp.
Mikakos, the health minister, has resigned. And look, it doesn't look great in terms of what's come out of the inquiry. Basically, every major head of either a department or a minister has turned around and go, I wasn't responsible for it. That was such and such's job. And then the next person's gone and go, no, I wasn't responsible for it. It was such and such's job. Turns out no one was responsible for anything.
Nah.
But effectively, Dan Andrews and Jenny Mikakos gave conflicting evidence at the inquiry, which, I mean, at the end of the day, Jenny is the health minister and was the health minister, and she was the one that probably should have been responsible for it, and she's resigned, I think, in acknowledgement of that.
It's funny though, because and we'll go on to talk more about this in a sec, but I wonder to the extent that we as the left, there's some sort of more of a broader discussion, maybe a question to you two. To what extent do you guys feel that we on the left actually disadvantage ourselves by wanting to engage in government accountability and oversight? Because I feel as though when we conduct an inquiry and when we put our hands up and volunteer responsibility and do long press conferences and answer everyone's questions, and whenever we do these things on the left, it simply creates ammunition for the other side of politics to then use against us. Because the first thing that a conservative member of my social circle said when Mikakos resigned was, see, Dan Andrews is throwing Mikakos under the bus. And it's like, well, I mean, clearly there were issues, and that's why we started an inquiry. We didn't dig our heels and resist the inquiry like the Banking Commission that the Liberals did. We, recognised that there was a problem, there was a failure in the government on the Labor side, and they had an inquiry, and they're getting to the point of the issue, and certain people are going to be held responsible, and that might mean that some people lose their jobs, as the case with Jenny Mikakos. To what extent do we disadvantage ourselves by holding ourselves accountable in a way that the other side doesn't? Do you guys think?
Oh, yeah, we do. Yeah, you do get disadvantaged, but I mean, that's the price of integrity.
But why do we have to lose all the goddamn time just because we got integrity? And the other side doesn't.
That's it is.
Just because the other side
doesn't. If you don't have integrity, that's how you win.
But it's so cynical. This is the thing that I like about Dan Andrews, is that this is good leadership, good governance, standing in front of an inquiry that you commissioned and said, yes, I was wrong. Yes, we made mistakes. That is that is what democracy should look like. And I'm comforted when our leaders do that, because it means that I feel as though when corruption takes place or when mistakes are made, there is something put in place to rectify that. And I'm incredibly concerned that the other side of politics is completely cynical in that regard, and they just want the win at any cost. And so will not have that kind of government accountability.
Yeah. And it's only the mistake that I think that she specifically, it's the private security question, right? Who made the decision to use private security? And I think it's less of a conspiracy, whether or not Jenny Mikakos actually lied or misled the inquiry, or whether or not she literally didn't remember. She's probably obviously under a lot of stress. Who knows? But I think it's probably more a case of classic government bureaucracy and and things happening quickly, and the system not being very well thought out, as opposed to necessarily what's what I'm looking for?
Negligence or malice.
Or negligence. But yeah, and it was only, and that's a decision they made. It's to use private security. I mean, there are reasons why you would be great to use private security in some ways, in the sense that it's giving money and jobs to Victorians.
Unless,
the
of course,
was that the implementation was terrible.
If it worked out the other way, where everyone else's hotel security was provided by the government, and it didn't work, then the criticism, and the private security worked, then the criticism would have been, well, why did they use the government? They should have gone with private contractors. The private industry is much better. It's just like this unwinnable fucking argument, because it is a one leg of a multifaceted response, which the other governments are just plain lucky that they didn't get wrong. It's not Anastasia Palaszczuk or Gladys Berejiklian in New South Wales and Queensland and New South Wales respectively, I don't think are masterful at the art of government. And here in Victoria, we've just got a bunch of Mr. Magoo's fucking bumping into shit. I think it was just luck. There was a crack in the system and the virus found it. And that's what happens. What that says to me, the lesson should be, is that any slip up, no matter how small, can end up in the virus creating a second wave or a third wave. I guess
you've got to think through things more. You can't just sort of wing it, which is effectively, I think, what they were doing at that period of time.
But that's what everyone was doing at the time. It was a rushed part of the response. We're talking about a virus which didn't exist a year ago. So to say it wasn't thought out well enough, or it wasn't deliberate enough, or the structures in Melbourne, in Victorian healthcare weren't what they should be, in contact tracing wasn't what it should be. Yeah, it's okay, that's probably all true, but that's of the two parties, let's pose the question like this. Of the two parties, Labor and Liberal, who do you feel would do more to adequately fund those operations to make sure that they're running effectively? Like, do we think it's the LNP who's been consistently stripping away and privatizing for the last, 40, 50 years? Or do we think it's the other side of politics who value, the left side of politics, which values public healthcare and all these kind of institutions, hospitals and education and, funding these things adequately? Like in a good faith, actual discussion, who do we feel is better on these issues?
Independence.
You would say that, Adam. You fucking centrist troll.
But look, I think over time, it depends how quickly we can get out of these restrictions. I think, if something goes wrong and we're sort of in these restrictions for till December or November, I think the poll that you mentioned before will swing. Because people are just naturally angry, and I think...
But that doesn't... Just because you approve of the measures, and you approve of the person that's proposing the measures, doesn't mean you're thrilled about it. Like, I remember having this argument with someone recently where it was like... Oh, I think my camera's overheated. Yep. These restrictions being too onerous, mask wearing, things like that. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm not thrilled about mask wearing. It's not like it's not like I enjoy wearing a mask. It's just I recognize it needs to be done because I'm not a fucking sociopath that wants other people dead. And that's it. That's all there is to it.
I saw something and we've talked about this before, but just the use of Twitter bots and fake profiles is still continuing with various hashtags that are out there at the moment. That's probably the thing that concerns me the most, more than anything. I get why people are angry. What scares me is the manipulation of that anger by, artificially inflating all certain ideas and movements in social media.
Is it weird though that there's the speech at the start of the show, The Newsroom, where he goes, if Democrats are so brilliant, why do they lose so goddamn always? And it's like, why is it all of these efforts to corrupt democracy and never trying to corrupt it towards the left? They're always trying to corrupt it towards authoritarian right-wing shitbags. Like, it's never we're going to corrupt democracy and make them have universal healthcare and, free kindergarten. Like, it's always like corrupt.
Part of me thinks it's not necessarily just the right wing of politics. I mean, it might be like a Sky News affiliate that's running this in the background or something, who knows? But
it seems to go one way is what I'm saying.
It seems, but the point being is that even with the Russian stuff, examples in the US, the point isn't so much to pick on one side of politics, it's just to destabilize the situation. And the way they destabilize the situation in this, if it is some sort of potential foreign actor or some other sort of criminal organization that's doing this, all they're doing is targeting the stability, which is up until probably 3 or 4 months ago, Victoria was pretty well behind everything that Dan Andrews was doing. So they're just sort of chipping away at the confidence in leadership in general. And I wonder whether or not the same thing would still be happening even if it was a Liberal government in power in Victoria.
Yeah, potentially. If they were just, fucking around for fucking around's sake. It
depends who or what is doing this, But my point being is that people are angry. We can appreciate that. It's when things are manipulated in ways that are nefarious and hard to track. That
Have you guys seen the stats on someone just brought out recently about why the hashtag sack Dan Andrews or something was trending on Twitter? And they crunched the numbers, and they're like, all right, all the people who are using this hashtag, a good quarter of the accounts didn't exist prior to 2020. And then I think a majority of the tweets were posted by just 20 accounts. So it's how 20 accounts could get something to trend, which just makes it look like it's something that is being... held opinion.
Social media is definitely part of the problem, but I think I put more feet at the blame of the traditional media than I do.
Do you mean more blame at the feet?
More, what did I say? More feet at the blame.
You said more feet at the blame.
I don't know.
Lame at the feet.
How many more feet you got?
You're putting the horse before the cart.
Indeed. I put more blame at the feet of the traditional media who treat the sort of the balance, the whole sort of balances bias aspect, where it's like, well, every story we need to represent both sides of the aisle on every single thing. And it's like, so there are people out there saying, like Donald Trump, I'm hearing, there are people out there saying like XYZ, Dan Andrews is a cunt. Your response? And Dan's like, I'm not a cunt, and here's why. But the fact that it's even being posed like that, I think is a function of this like broken, outdated model of traditional media where everything like requires that kind of response, that kind of and so framing it in those terms is actually a kind of bias in itself, because it means that basically all the media is doing is currently right now is really criticizing the hell out of Dan Andrews under the auspices of like, oh, well, we're seeing this online, people are saying, I'm hearing, but like none of that's real. Like how much of that's real? Yeah, I'm not saying, but I'm not saying that we don't have accountability for our leaders, but certainly like when you as a journalist know that you are amplifying what is almost assuredly a bad faith attack, don't you have a responsibility to like question what function you doing your job correctly is actually serving and who it's serving? Like if we're talking about getting maximum accountability for the voters, I go, okay, well, that's fair enough. It's reasonable that you ask that question about painters and being outside and that sort of thing. Okay, sure, you can justify that. But when the question to Dan Andrews, as it was during the press conference today, is why are you a liar? Why did you lie to the inquiry the other day? It's like, well, that's not a good faith question. That's just you trying to have a gotcha moment as a journalist, amplifying, like horseshit that you've seen online. Like, I think the media has a certain responsibility for amplifying all of this stuff and for bringing it into the mainstreaming QAnon by talking about it all the time, like mainstreaming these batshit crazy views, these conspiracy theories, Trump, coronavirus isn't real, flat earthers, even like responding to it in such a way as to be like, oh, we're debunking this, still pays it a certain amount of attention and gives it oxygen. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting
you're the
point.
Journalist in the room.
Yeah, well, and that's definitely sort of the interesting like point, because I know that in terms of just like journalistic writing, that there were like methodologies that were taught with things like that. When you're writing out a story, you'll obviously have like the thing that's going on that you want to talk about, but you'll also be wanting to. You can't just say like they say like it's not interesting just to say the thing. You got to talk to the people who were affected by the thing, or the people who have like different takes on the thing. But yeah, you're right. When you break it down, often people just break it down into that of like, all right, we have like we give equal amounts of space to the opposition of whatever we're writing about, to
climate change and anti-climate change, like those are it's not the same
that sort of thing. So I guess it kind of needs to be stated more as you got to make it equitable, not equal, kind of like they need to be. You got to balance the scales of it, like that analogy. I can't remember which like talk show host person did this, but like with the climate change idea of like actually balancing this issue isn't just having an anti-climate change person and a climate change scientist on a panel. It would be more like having 97 climate scientists and 3 people who were against it. That's actually the balance we're dealing with here.
I think it was John Oliver who did that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, okay, yeah, John Oliver. That's probably where I saw it. But yeah, it's a very interesting way of putting it, and that kind of really shows that why are you giving what a very like a small minority of people saying the equal weight to what experts in their field are saying.
We've got a friend of the show, David, writing in saying Sky News, when they see 70% of Victorians support the lockdown measures, accuse Victorians of having Stockholm Syndrome. All you need to know about News Corp's role in whipping up the outrage. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like saying, the vast majority of the public, in political terms, especially nowadays, 70% approval of just about anything is frankly incredible. To say that they're wrong and they don't know, like, if it was 30% of Australians support, of Victorians support the measure, they'd be like, Dan Andrews overrules the majority, dictatorial Dan. But if it's the other way around, it's 70%
of people
it's us having
to jump off a bridge. Would you do it?
It's us having Stockholm Syndrome because we disagree with their minority opinion. Like, and yet it gets covered. And this is the problem. Rupert Murdoch owning News Corp and starting Fox News and running all these papers in the UK, I think single-handedly is responsible for corrupting the discourse across the Western world. Like, I can't think of anyone, even more so than Trump, I can't think of anyone else who's done more to break fucking democracy than Rupert Murdoch. Like,
a large amount of the shift to the right over the last decade is land squarely at his
directly attributable to Fox News and the propaganda apparatus. Yeah.
The only thing I can wonder is what happens when he dies. Maybe when he dies, it gets better.
His son will just take over. Like, not the one who left, the other one.
Yeah, not the other one. There's two of them. We don't know. I can't remember their names.
Yeah, not the one that had the principles enough to leave.
It's the business model of fermenting outrage is as attractive now as it was yesterday, and that's not going to change. I was just saying these properties exist. Like, the reason the Australian still exists and hasn't been, folded up into a box and, crushed for parts is because it serves as a useful part of the propaganda apparatus, because you can say, look, we've got this credible reporting arm called the Australian, and they're very good, very nice boys talking in, normal, reasonable terms about the right-wing agenda. But the thing that makes the money is the outrage mill, is the Sky News, is the Alan Jones, the commentary, the stuff that gets shared, that gets viral, is the stuff that causes outrage. So they can point to this high-low strategy, right? Look, this credible reporting arm that's feeding, it's this pipeline of stuff that starts in the Australian and
differentiates it from organisations like Breitbart or one of those contemporaries in the US.
No, we're very legit. We're so legit. But really it's part of this pipeline of misinformation that starts in the Australian and ends up in fucking, as you say, Breitbart and, I don't know, what other psychotic conservative OWN and all these other conservative publications. It's a strategy.
Now, gentlemen, I'm going to shift the conversation now, but I want to get your opinion on the left and right arguments of this story. I want to understand how the outrage mill is perpetuating a myth, and also how, they could achieve balance in this story. It's a story from Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I know that we're in a world where, reuse, recycle is really important to help the environment, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But there are certain things, to be clear, you should not recycle.
This is true.
And one of those things is condoms. But this particular group of people in Vietnam thought they might try it anyway. So police in Vietnam have confiscated an estimated 345,000 used condoms, which have been cleaned and resold as new.
I'm sick.
They said the bags weighed over 360 kilograms.
That's a lot of bags.
What
the 345,000. They took a sample and worked it out.
But at what stage did they seize them in?
Well, this is where it gets a bit sort of vague. Apparently, a 34-year-old woman detained during the bust told police they used the prophylactics. Is that how you pronounce it?
Prophylactics.
Yeah, they used prophylactics.
They were first boiled in water, so then dried and reshaped on a wooden phallus before being repackaged and resold.
If you think your job is fucked up,
not clear,
don't ever complain about your fucking job in the Western world ever again, because you don't have to rinse out fucking dingers by hand in order to wipe out the crusty jizz.
Yeah.
Boiled. Could you imagine what fucking boiled jizz smells like? Jesus Christ.
Well, it'd be like fucking poaching an egg.
God.
Where they got it from, but apparently the monthly input of used condoms came from an unknown person.
Wait, hang on. Are these all condoms as well used by a single person?
Well, we don't know.
Are you telling me that someone had to jizz like 345,000 times?
Some degenerate.
It's unclear.
It's like
The question being is there someone who is literally
I'm sorry, I'm out. I can't produce more product. And they're like,
is there someone that's literally going through garbage trying to find used condoms, or is it literally like a couple of people just like? And as you said, George,
I just threw up in my mouth a little.
It's disgusting. And look, they've been cleaned, but it's obviously there's risk of STDs and other stuff that could be in that. You don't know.
No, there's a reason. There's a reason you don't reuse condoms because that's not how that works.
Isn't that also though? Like people used to though, right? Like not latex condoms or whatever, but I thought like old
sheepskin,
sort of
whatever.
Previous sort of versions of like prophylactics and stuff like that of being sheepskin or whatever that was just like something you put over your junk and then you rinse it out afterwards to be used next time.
Yeah.
So I guess that was something that they did, but it's not like, but that was, it's like a menstrual cup or whatever, right? You bought one and you reuse it.
Yeah. It's
not like I don't just like use the sheepskin condom and then take it back to the shop. Like you don't.
But as George said, it highlights the economic inequalities of some of these developing nations. The woman from the factory was paid 24 cents.
Not enough. Whatever it was, it wasn't enough. It's not enough. If it was $1,000 a kilogram, it's not enough. 24 cents per kilogram of washed condoms.
Yeah. There was 360 kilograms. So the most they could have made was whatever that is, 360 times 24 cents. So it's
not a lot.
But point being is if you're going to Vietnam anytime soon, which no one is because we're all in lockdown, but if you are, take your own condoms. Don't buy
and use them once. To be clear.
We cannot stress that enough. Only the ones.
Yeah, you don't see any of these environmentals like, well, I'm using a metal straw. Well, I'm going to start using metal condoms as well. No, it doesn't work. They have to be rubber in order for them to be good, and you can only use them once.
Latex.
Yes, not rubber, but yes, latex, as you say. Not actual rubber. Rubber condom tapped.
Ooh, can you imagine?
Oh.
Friction?
There's a lot about this story I don't want to imagine, to be honest.
Well, that's fucking disgusting. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. I will stress, please do not think about reused condoms when going to unnaturalshow.com. Please do not form that association. Make sure you follow us on all social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, the instantaneous grams and TikTok. Make sure you follow me on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
You can follow me and my magnificent beard at AC Doreen.
And make sure you follow us all to Vietnam, where we'll be picking up some sweet used dingers. Thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. Appreciate you listening. We'll see you next week.
See you guys.
Still can't believe I said the poached egg thing.
Disgusting.